Fixate on Code, Episode 13. Alright, Larry Buerta here, and you're listening to Fixate on Code, the weekly bite-sized podcast where I talk to the best devs about their favorite strategies for writing great code. Now, let's chat with today's featured guest, Tereza Sokol. Tereza, are you ready to get down to business?
Definitely.
Tereza is a front-end developer obsessed with the Elm language. NoRedInk, a platform helping millions of students learn how to write, nabbed her after spotting her skills. Tereza is also the creator of Elm Plot, a graph plotting library built in Elm. Tereza, can you fill in some of the gaps in that intro and tell me a little bit about what you get up to when you're not writing code?
So I'm from Copenhagen, Denmark, and I've been coding for most of my life, I think. I learned BASIC on Commodore 64 before I learned English. I remember how surprised I was to find that if and then were actual English words. I've been coding for quite a while, and I still love it so much. But when I'm not coding, I like to read. Mostly fiction, leaning towards something along the lines of philosophy, political science, and psychology, and actual essays on these subjects as well. I think I like the same sort of eloquence in fiction as I do in code. I think it's very beautiful, the process you go through in writing both literary works and code. And I think the two subjects have way more in common than we give them credit for. And they're both really fascinating. So, yeah.
So you've been writing code most of your life. When did you actually start to write code?
Professionally, probably. I used to work in my father's company when I was he had a company. He was also a software engineer, which explains it sort of, which made software for pharmacies. And I worked there when I was 13, 14, started working slowly. So, but I always coded a little bit when I was younger, just small games and that sort.
Wow, so it's really been a lifelong learning experience.
Yeah.
Now, Tereza, what are you most passionate about as a developer?
In terms of the specifics in software development, I think I like the design part the best. As I mentioned in the last answer, then it's the elegance possible in any sort of media of expression, which I'm passionate about. In the terms that we work on in software is slightly different than those in literature. It's a little more difficult to design a language to just ask everybody to speak it. But in software engineering, we express logic, and that's a lot more malleable, and I think I like that we sort of have some opportunities to design the entire language as well, which is also where I'm really into Elm as well.
You're going to be involved directly with the design of programming languages?
Well, I want to, and that's actually kind of why I really like Elm as well, and because I want to get into Haskell so I can work on the compiler and sort of help out on that front. That'd be really cool. That's one of my ambitions, at least. I'm far from there.
And Elm seems like a great stepping stone for getting into a more functional approach to programming.
Yeah, definitely. I sort of like the theoretical part of programming, trying to figure out the best way of designing things, and also building on the experiences of these 40 years we have in software engineering, and even older maybe in programming. I've learned a lot of programming language growing up, both for assembly and coupled and all these. I used to work on these way mainframes kind of type of deal, and they had some really funky languages. The one I worked the most in was a language called RPG, and it was one of those languages which actually had you had to put the instruction code in the 35th character or something like that. So I sort of have a love for programming languages and what the the design of them can do to how your code ends up looking, also just on feeling and how it changes the experience you have when you do development.
And that's a lot of experience. You've worked with languages that few people will ever get the opportunity to work with. Now, Tereza, can you take me to the worst experience you've ever had on a project?
Yeah, so I used to work as a consultant on a pretty big web project, developing a platform for video streaming. The project just slowly slided into total decay, and refactoring was never scheduled for it. I think it began with poor management and priorities. The company preferred to have consultants or steady employees because it was sort of easy disposable, which is already there, pretty bad. And it resulted in a lot of people going in and out of the project and according to their own schedule. And it also had the effect that people rarely had a strong connection to the project itself, and so it kind of showed in the code that you never really get to care for the project because it never really becomes yours. You don't have that sort of sense of ownership.
So the entire project was built by contractors and they had no internal staff?
I think there was one guy who was actually a steady employee, but he was sort of the only one that stayed on the project throughout the entire thing. I think I came in halfway through, and it was one of my colleagues back then who also started the project, kind of. But there's been a lot of people through it, and I think the management was quite they're prioritizing. They just have to finish it on time. All these deadlines, and a lot of things were just kind of pushed under the carpet, and it was more fuck it, ship it kind of feel. Which is
How did it feel working in that environment on a day-to-day basis? How did you get out of it?
It was pretty terrible for me personally because I really care about code and I really care about clean code, and I hate leaving a piece of code in a mess. But they sort of in an environment like that, it sort of really pushes you to your limits. If you want to do that, you have to. I used to spend a lot of my free time doing fixing the code as well because I just couldn't stand the way.
Because you care too much, I suppose.
Yeah, which was problematic in its own sense because you're not supposed to do that. It's not supposed to take over your entire life because that's not healthy either. I think from a purely technical perspective, then I think it also started off pretty badly. The choices that were made from the beginning, it was built on React and Backbone and reactive streams, which is they all ended up fighting for being the main paradigm. Regarding so Backbone is kind of object oriented, and reactive streams is functional reactive programming, as well as React is sort of somewhere in the middle, and they're it made it really hard for also all these new people. They didn't know, it's hard to see. None of these libraries really guided you towards a very strict architecture, and it was hard to make decisions on what to do next and how to do things, which resulted in just people doing whatever they felt like because there was no restrictions for it.
And you're all working in competing paradigms all the time as well.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you think the situation could have been improved while you were there?
Well, I think one of the things that I think would have improved my last situation there, the project that it could be using a language like Elm, which actually puts some restrictions onto you of what you can do and has a very clearly explained architecture. And I think using Elm as a tool is one of my absolute favorite and necessary part of development now when I do front-end applications. So yeah, I would hate to leave that in.
How has Elm changed how you work? How difficult is it for someone to pick up a language like Elm and then get to a point where you can confidently build something useful?
I think so. There's a lot of focus on. So Elm is like a purely functional language, and that can be sort of terrifying to some people to have. If you think of Haskell, and it's like, oh, you have to know everything about monads and stuff like that. But Elm sort of guides you quietly towards like functional programming, and there's been a lot of focus on creating really good documentation. And I know Evan, he generally like focuses on a lot on the documentation being also like a learning process for you. So you start out with the simplest examples and sort of build it up. So it becomes like a little story you read when you read documentation for a package or something. So for me, it didn't really take a long time. I think when I first started writing Elm for real, then it took me like 2-3 weeks before I felt really comfortably, but only like a few hours before I could write something like a small application. So I think regarding what actually changed the way I work, I think the philosophy behind Elm changed how I work a lot. The way it sort of encouraged you to think about your data structures and think about the design of your application before you do anything else, before you actually start coding. I feel like that has changed a lot, like the way I code a lot.
Wow, so Elm has had a massive impact on your workflow. But Tereza, where in your daily work are you still meeting frustration? Where do you feel that things can be done in a much better way?
I think, so at NoRedInk, we have a huge code base, like it's gigantic. And right now we use Webpack to bundle it all, and it's extremely slow, and it's so frustrating because so you can compile the file that you work in easily with like an Elm make linter, and that's really fast. But if you actually have to get something on your screen, it's really slow because that compiles everything. So, but we're actually fixing that. We're building a project internally. It's called Jetpack, which is not based on JavaScript like Webpack is, but on Haskell as well, to bundle our assets. It might be open sourced later, actually. So, pretty excited about that.
Is it a tool specifically for compiling Elm projects?
It's for compiling like both JS and Elm in the most efficient way.
How far along are you guys with that? When can we expect the big reveal?
I'm not personally working on it, but I know people like my colleague has been going through a long design process, and he's definitely. We were pairing with them the other day, and yeah, pretty much had it running pretty well. I think I don't know what the scope is actually though, but I'm pretty excited about it either way. I think there's still at least a few months of work on that, but yeah.
Yeah, the whole bundler area feels it's often quite up and down and not sure what to use. Have you looked at something like JSPM, System.js, Rollup, or any of those alternatives?
No, actually, we've only. I think my colleagues have definitely been going in and checking them out and getting some inspiration for it. But personally, I've only used Webpack and the old ones like Gulp and Grunt and all that sorts. But yeah.
So with all of the new projects and libraries and frameworks that are coming out, what are you most excited about at the moment?
Well, I have my own project, the graphing library, and I have a new version coming out, and it's in review right now. I usually go over it with some of my colleagues, so I'm really excited about that. It's been like a really exciting process to build this library myself, to design an API from the very scratch. And
So this is Elm Plot?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. But actually the Jetpack thing is also really exciting. I really want to do some more Haskell. So I plan to pair more on this project as well. As well as just, I ran into so we were doing some Elm CSS the other day. It's basically CSS written in Elm. And we were talking about how sometimes, I have a way of ordering CSS, the different statements when the ordering doesn't actually change the output. And so we were thinking of making a tool for that. So I think a small project like this would be good to start on, but I still have yet to do that.
Yeah, I suppose the struggle is trying to find the time.
Yeah.
Now, with all of the new languages and libraries coming out, how do you decide what to learn and where do you make the time to learn it?
So I think I spent a long time like working on a lot of Elm projects in general. I think the JavaScript community is sort of like, I haven't really looked into too many of the things. I'm more like from a philosophical perspective that I see the ideas and like what they do is really cool. But in terms of learning actual tools, then I sort of stick to the Elm community. But I have like a very strict learning schedule in my life. So I have like on Saturdays I keep a log of everything like that I need to learn and my goals and stuff like that. So I keep like a diary sort of thing, and to sort of keep track of what I need to learn and do, which is pretty efficient, I find.
How do you decide what goes into your to-do list and what to tackle first?
I think initially it's just like what would help my own workflow right now. Like, so I don't actually have a university degree because I think I learn really well from being faced with problems, and then I have a lot of motivation to go find a solution for those problems. And this is also what has drove me to like functional programming as well, and sort of like seeing that, okay, I had this problem with this project that I was telling you about, and what could solve that, and then I was like separating data structures from the algorithms and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think as a concrete answer, then yeah, it's just I sort of prioritize the things that I need at in my immediate programming experience.
So, Tereza, is there a specific aspect about programming that has dramatically changed the way that you think about and write code?
I think there's a lot of like personal aspects that actually goes into the way I write code. I think what improved my code the most was sort of thinking about how I felt during my experience coding, and if I would get frustrated, I just learned to just stop and just be like, because I saw that that's where like my integrity falls out, and I write bad code is when I get frustrated with a bug or something, and then I just stop and do something else, and then sort of the problem just like goes in like a background process in my brain, and then at the time when I come back, I can solve it in the right way with integrity restored.
And it's weird how those little breaks can really give us a breakthrough on our problems. I know I sit sometimes for 2 or 3 hours just banging my head against a problem, and then I go away for a few minutes, and then I come back, and then I can suddenly just solve the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Incredible waste of time to keep working on something if you're stuck in that. I think also just like taking a look from like a design perspective, from like a broader perspective of your application, and see like what problems can I sort of batch into a single problem and solve it. So instead of solving small problems all around your application, try to take a look at maybe there's like a design problem with your product itself, like which essentially will resolve your code as well.
And I suppose sometimes it's just a little bit about taking a look at the bigger picture. And with that, we've come to the end of our first segment. Tereza, I'm about to throw some quickfire questions your way. Let's do this. What is the best advice about programming you've ever received?
I think I read a quote by Linus Torvaldsen, which is like the guy who made Linux, and he said that a good programmer thinks about his data structures, and bad programmers think about code. And I think that's so true. I think I'm a huge fan of like hammock-driven development, where you just kind of think a long time about your data structures and then start coding.
Tereza, which personal habits do you attribute to writing better code?
As we just talked about, like taking breaks and thinking about the big picture, I think that really helps. And also just generally like taking care of yourself during the process. Don't work too hard. Not in like don't be passionate about your work, but just don't work 10 hours in a row and remember to eat and so like drink water.
Drink water. Wow, that is some stellar advice. Tereza, if you could recommend one book on programming, what would it be and why?
So I read this book called Clean Code. I think it's pretty famous. I think it was really, really great. This just sort of goes over like a bunch of tools you can, or like methods you can use to write cleaner code, and it goes through like everything from like naming to structuring and like consistency. And I learned a lot. I think it's, even though a lot of these things come like intuitively when you write a lot of code, but it's nice to get it like formalized and sort of put it in boxes, and it does that really well.
And get some information from some of the guys who've been in the industry for a far longer time than we have. Now, Tereza, who in the front-end world is doing work that really inspires you?
Well, obviously, like Evan Jablicki, who's the inventor of Elm. I think he's doing a really good job. I mean, he's not only technically skilled, but I think his integrity and loyalty towards quality is very inspiring, and in the manner he manages to inspire the same in others is quite admirable.
All right, Tereza, let's reverse it a little over here. Imagine you wake up and you have no recollection of ever having written code. With your knowledge of the tools, books, and courses available today, how would you go about learning to program from scratch?
I don't even remember what it's like not to know what an array is.
That's quite a timeline to cover over there.
But I think I would go work with somebody, or like be taught by somebody who knows programming already. I think there's a lot of like osmosis going on regarding programming. And I think drawing diagrams of like, which is a lot easier with functional programming languages. Like when the way I was taught when I was a kid was just like a bunch of drawings of like those classical diagrams of ifs and thens and how the flow of your application goes. I thought that was really helpful to sort of create a mental image of what your application is supposed to look like. And so that, and like I'm a manual kind of girl, like like in the way that when I had to learn JavaScript, I just went through all of the documentation of all methods of all the objects that exist
of the entire API.
I just went through because that was how I used to do it in the old languages. The API is a lot smaller, so I was a little overwhelmed at first, but I figured that it was nice because then you sort of have an idea of what is possible. It's not that you have to remember everything, but when you have to use it,
you just know that it's there.
Yeah, exactly, which is really helpful. So I don't know.
Wow. Okay, what did you use to go through the JavaScript API?
I used the Mozilla documentation basically of the API, and I think it was the 3W schools. I think that's what it's called. It's been a while. But yeah,
that is a lot of documentation to chew through.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an old habit from my childhood to just go through those. How I was taught to learn. I'm not sure it's the most efficient way actually, but it gets you.
That's some really great advice, though. I mean, I could really benefit from doing that. And Tereza, let's wrap up with your top tip on how to work smart and the best way that we can connect with you.
I think the best way to work smart would be to be aware of your own mental state, and like we spoke about the whole frustration thing. I think that's incredibly important in anything you do, whether it's learning or working professionally. Be aware of how you feel and use your emotions to actually motivate you to reach your goals. So that's pretty meta, but I find that sort of being extra conscious and self-aware can help you reach your goals pretty easily. And the best way to connect with me is probably on Twitter. My name is Tereza with an underscore at the end, before the A.
Can you spell that out for our listeners?
Yes, it's TEREZK_A, and that should be it.
Perfect. To everyone out there, you've been hanging with Tereza Sokol and Larry Buerta. Head over to fixate.it where you'll find links and timestamps for everything we've been chatting about today. Tereza, thank you for sharing your journey with Fixate on Code. Keep pushing the limits and keep pushing great code.